I recognise the Honourable Member Moana Maki. Tēnā koe, Ms Maki.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to take a call on the second reading of the Sullivan Birth Certificate Bill. To congratulate my colleague Lewis Awall and friend Lewis Awall once again for being a champion for some very important issues in this House and around the country. And of course to the Sullivan whānau for having the courage to go out there, and I don't underestimate how difficult that must be to have a bill with your family's name on it, going through Parliament, being spoken about. Like Mr Haig, I was on the Select Committee for the marriage equality process, but not for this process. But what really struck me about the marriage equality process was when you sat down and looked into the faces of the people submitting, you realise that they were sitting in front of a bunch of strangers being forced to talk about the most personal aspects of their lives in order to see progress in human rights legislation. Not many of us who are just afforded these rights at birth, we don't earn them. There's nothing particularly special about us when we're heterosexual. We just kind of get all these rights handed to us by the fact that we're born straight. We've never had to do that. We don't have to sit in front of a bunch of strangers and argue why we should be treated exactly the same as everyone else, why our family is just as valuable as everyone else's families. And when you go through a process of looking into the faces of the very real people affected by this legislation, you really appreciate the courage and the commitment. And so I imagine to do that when it's only your family must be even more difficult, but it is just as important, So I really want to acknowledge the family who we are assisting tonight to address a great injustice. And I was also on the Select Committee that considered the civil union legislation, and the change in the tenor of the debate between civil unions and marriage equality was huge, and in a very positive way. The civil union debate was very, very bruising, very, very brutal, very, very negative. Marriage equality wasn't a walk in the park either, but by comparison, things had changed significantly, and there was a lot more respect at the Select Committee in the marriage equality process than we saw in the civil union process. But when we went through civil unions, a lot of civil unions was about giving same-sex couples the rights or same-sex and de facto couples the rights of married couples without going the full way to marriage. But the stories that we heard were just truly horrific, particularly in the case of the death or incapacitation of one family member, where that family member was, and where that family member then was a biological parent of the child involved, and where there had been a falling out with the extended family, just the complete lack of power of the partner in that relationship to have any rights at all. So we had situations where we had couples who had been together for decades and decades, just loving, supportive relationships. One of them ends up in hospital. The family didn't approve of the relationship. The family swoops in, takes over, goes against the wishes of the couple, of the individual that's in hospital, that's sick, and the partner had no rights. Absolutely no rights at all. No rights in funeral arrangements. Not even able to see the person that they'd been in a loving, committed relationship with for decades, purely because the state refused to even recognise in the slightest way that their relationship had any kind of legal standing. So a lot of that was addressed during the civil union debate, but the one crucial part that didn't get addressed by civil unions and remains an issue today is adoption. And we acknowledged during that debate that the status of children within both heterosexual heterosexual civil union and same-sex civil union couples remains a very grey area under law, and one that does need to be resolved. Because at any time we can wind up with a situation like this where suddenly you realise that where rights had been expected, and I expect that a lot of heterosexual civilly united couples believe they have those rights, but in fact it is an area of law that remains that remains very grey. My colleague Jacinda Ardern has a bill to try and address that. It is an area that we do need to address, because when you're talking about the relationship between parents and children, you're talking about something extremely personal, and it is something that this Parliament should prioritise. One of the things I think this really does highlight is that your relationship with your parents doesn't end when you turn 18. So guardianship, which was offered by the Care of Children Act, and that guardianship is a very different thing from being a parent. You can say that someone has legal responsibility for someone until they turn 18. But if anything, I think our relationship with our parents gets better beyond the age of 18. It stops being a kind of you do this, do that, mother-child kind of relationship, father-child, and it becomes a friendship. And it becomes a very, very fulfilling relationship. And so I entirely understand why it is incredibly important to have that relationship with your parents, a relationship that only gets better the older you get, legally recognised under the law. And why it's not enough to say, well, they're all adults and you should just get on with it. No, I would be just gutted if the legal relationship I had with my parents was in any way compromised by an action of the state. And the final 2 points I just want to make, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that this bill would have the support of everyone in the House, because I think given the amount of time we spend in here and how many times we spend as MPs in the community dealing with the horrific fallout from parents who don't want to be involved in their kids' lives, the amount of time we spend talking about parents who don't fulfil their legal responsibilities, who don't behave in a way that's conducive to a healthy relationship and a healthy child, it would seem to me to be utterly hypocritical and repugnant to not support a parent who says, I want to legally be there for my child. For this Parliament to actually stand in the way and say, well, we're not going to allow that. I think where we have parents who want to be involved in their their children's lives, who want to take that legal responsibility and who want the state to recognise that we should be doing everything to get the state out of the way and say, absolutely, we wish there were more of you. And we wish that every family had the strength and the love and the commitment that this family has for each other, obviously, to go through this process. Our country would be a much better place, a less violent place, a much healthier place if the kind of commitment and morals and family values that we're seeing in this particular family were reflected right across our society. Finally, I just want to end on saying, to make the point that this bill does highlight a very real fact, that until we get full equality under the law for same-sex couples, there will always be loopholes, there will always be families that fall through the cracks, and there will always be sad cases like this where, through no intended malice, the law does something very, very cruel and does something very, very destructive in a family's life. And that's why full equality for same-sex couples must be the goal of this Parliament. If we truly want to see every family supported, every family recognised, to support loving, good families, then that will only happen when we get full equality for same-sex couples. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member, Dr. Paul Hutchison.